Western Ag Network on the road at the Montana Stockgrowers Association Convention. Brought to you by Torgeson's Equipment.
Western Ag Network is back out on the road here this week in Billings, Montana, attending the Montana Stockgrowers Association annual trade show and convention underway at the Northern Hotel and Doubletree Hotels in downtown Billings. And since 1884, the association has been advocating on behalf of livestock producers across the Big Sky State, well, even before it was a state, in fact. And joining us here today is the president of the Montana Stockgrowers Association, Mr. John Grandy. And John, as we gather here in Billings this week, when you hear that number, 1884, what does that mean to you? I know your family's been in the livestock business in Montana almost that long as well, but what does that mean to be a part of an organization that is older than the state of Montana itself?
It's quite an accomplishment, yeah, and actually Lane, my family was here 7 years before that. It was ranching in roughly our location, but yeah, about 5 years prior to statehood. It's a legacy that we have to take very seriously, that all the people that have gone before and all the things they've done, and it's nice to know we've made a lot of progress, and of course it's a challenge that we're still working on a lot of the same issues, but it's a great legacy to be a part of.
And as we look at the association and the decades that it has represented the livestock industry, issues come, issues go. Some issues stayed the same for decades on end. But as we're gathered here, obviously policy is the key part of this convention, creating a policy book that the stockgrower staff out in Helena follows during the state legislature or on the national level as well. I guess when we talk about policy, what are some of those key things that cattlemen and women are going to be working on here this week?
Well, there's a lot of discussions, things that are ongoing that'll be just discussed in the hallways and everything, but some resolutions we know are going to be coming forward. Our land use committee is starting to meet right now, and we'll have beef production and marketing and our ag policy and taxes. They'll be meeting in the next couple of days. So, there's everything from some of the basic that's probably not controversial, looking at more water storage, looking at water recommendations for the next legislature, looking at working with agencies on better vegetation management, some of those things that I think we all pretty well agree on. But then there'll be a lot of other things, not necessarily disagreement, but that are a little more challenging. There's tax issues. The estate tax. We don't like it exactly the way it is, but at least through the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we've had a larger exemption of that. That's going to be expiring in 2025, so it's time to get back in the saddle again and keep working on trying to do away with that altogether, or at the very least keep our exemptions high. Then property tax is a thing we've talked about a lot, is the definition of ag property in our state tax system. Do we like that definition? Are there ways we can change it? Should there be something like a recreational classification for some of this land that's currently classified as agriculture, but people aren't really using it as ag? And that's a definite case. We already have policy that says we support that concept, but supporting the concept and figuring out the details of how to actually enact it are two different things. So that's a big discussion. Another one that I think we're going to have quite a bit of discussion on is this association has traditionally been, fairly wary of a lot of government involvement and a lot of government subsidies. But the reality is, while we say we don't like that, when some of these programs during the pandemic, we had CFAP and ARPA and some of these things, when they come up, our producers are taking those money lines. So we need to have that discussion of exactly, where do we stand on this? What programs can we support? And along with that, some of the programs that are in place, like LRP, that for years almost no one used that. The last few years it's grown tremendously, but there's issues with LRP. How can we make that more usable? So, we can keep going, but that's a few of the big topics we'll be dealing with.
And John, as we've traveled here this summer and fall, one of the questions I asked almost all of the folks that join us here on our Western Ag Network programming is, how do we keep family ranches and business? How do we maybe bring on that next generation or a new generation into agriculture? I guess from your perspective as a leader in stock growers, we just talked about all those policy issues and things that impact profitability and how people stay in business. But how do we keep family ranches in business in today's age?
Well, yes, I just touched on some of them, and that's why we're here. I mean, that is our sole purpose, is to work on what can we do to impact producer profitability. And yeah, you do that through working on property taxes, working on, doing away with the death tax. There are so many public lands issues, and of course, the Public Lands Council and the State Grazing Associations met earlier today. So many things coming out of the Department of Interior with re-bisoning the West and new grazing rules and conservation leases and these things that we're working on a weekly basis to protect our public lands ranchers there. Obviously, the delisting of the grizzly bear and getting better state management of that. There are so many issues, and that's just a sample because I don't know all of them. That's why we're here, is we need somebody else to be coming here telling us how do we impact producer profitability.
And, maybe you look back, you mentioned your family was ranching in Montana 7 years before the Stockgrowers was even founded. I guess, what would your forefathers think of today's world and ranching in today's world? What would maybe surprise them the most?
Boy, I don't know that I've sat and pondered that one, Lane, but I mean, you got to start with technology. Obviously, how technology has changed so dramatically from simple technologies we've had for a long time, tractors and hydraulics and everything, to now when we're getting into precision agriculture and tracking our cows and virtual fence, and obviously that's huge. Our ability to get together and communicate and have these kind of meetings, that's easier to do today than it was 100 years ago. So I mean, there's any number of things, and again, the government involvement, that's a pro and a con. I mean, there's ways in which we wish we could go back to then and have less government, but there's also vital programs that our government does that we take advantage of. So, but all these things would surprise, my ancestors.
And lastly, sometimes in agriculture, we really get focused on the challenges that we're facing and the negative side of things, because we have to have our voices heard and advocate for what we do. But on a brighter note, what are you looking forward to in the next year and few years as you continue your presidency with Stockgrowers? But what are you looking forward to the most for Montana livestock in the years to come?
Well, there's so many ways to go with that, Lane, that, starting out from an industry perspective, of course, what's driving everything is the low cattle numbers. And so we've just had a tremendous cattle market. Since that October on feed report, there's been some negative sentiment, and that's knocked things back considerably. That's going to straighten itself out at some point, and we've still got a couple darn good years for cattle prices. So that's a positive thing. Obviously, you can't really take advantage of those cattle prices if you don't have cattle, if you're droughted out. Part of the country's still that way. Most of the state of Montana, with exceptions, but most of the state is in a lot better situation moisture-wise, so that's a good thing. Specific to the role of the stock growers, and here, I guess you have to start with just the people. It's all about the people and the relationships, and we have a great board of directors. We made the decision to take on some new projects, so we've staffed up, hired some additional staff to do that. We have an exciting staff that are just charging and doing some things. So without getting into certain projects, it's just great that we have the people in place that we can be thinking of these projects and carrying them out.
Well, again, Mr. John Grandy joining us here today. Thanks for joining us, and good luck for the convention here this week.
Thank you, Lane. Glad to have you here.
Well, again, friends, as we continue to have more conversations on the road this week from the Montana Stockgrowers Association, just a reminder, our friends at Torgerson's Equipment bringing you these conversations on the road at the Western Ag Network here in Billings this week.
Even when you have to weather the storm, even when the unexpected happens, even when the local environment slows things down, we will get you what you need when you need it. We are committed to getting you back in the seat, back to work, back to what matters. At Torgerson's Equipment, we know what matters most: community, family, working every day to make your day more productive.
Well, as Western Ag Network continues our travels on the road this week at the Montana Stockgrowers Convention here in downtown Billings. Torgerson's has been a proud sponsor of all of our convention coverage the last week at the Montana Grain Growers and this week here in Billings at the Stockgrowers. And joining us here today is Cheney Bowen with the Torgerson's equipment brand. And you know, as livestock producers, look at the year end. What has it been like talking with livestock producers and really looking at all the options that they have through Torgerson's to really make life out in the countryside a little bit better?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year for them to go from wondering what the year was going to bring and, you know, are we going to have any hay to put up or what are calves going to be like to now calves are worth something. And now maybe some guys are looking for some equipment. Seems like a lot of skid steers, some hay equipment, finally getting to update some of the things that they've been wanting to update for quite a few years. So it's been enjoyable, but the interest rates have also complicated things. So we've had to get pretty creative as well with that. Thankfully, we got the team behind us to do it. So,
well, you know, you mentioned skid steers, and so many producers say, gosh darn, having a skid steer could really change how we do things out here on the countryside, building fence, cleaning out corrals. So I guess why is now kind of a good time to maybe look at, it's year end, of course, we're kind of looking at what could we do with the account to maybe offset some things, but I guess what are some of the things you're talking with producers at the multiple Torgerson's locations across Montana and Wyoming as well?
Yeah. On the skid steer front, you know, we're discussing all the features, the updates, safety, you know, depending whether it's case or JCB, the side door. You know, there's a lot of older producers that are moving more towards that side door just from a safety aspect. But then there's a lot of guys that just love the tried and true, you know, front door entry. And I would say the interest rates, we're able to get real creative, and then just updated features the technology that's came in the last few years, backup cameras, you know, higher lift capacities, larger lift capacities. So we see some guys lifting a couple bales at once, and they're moving a lot of that hay a lot faster now. So yeah.
So also, it's tough to think about haying season. I mean, we think about hay. It's been a pretty open winter across much of Montana, so not a lot of hay getting fed right now, but that does put top of the mind haying equipment and getting ready for that haying season coming up in 2024. What should folks be thinking about here this winter as well when it comes to haying, and maybe not come May or June when it's time to get out in the field there?
Yeah, I think one thing if we've learned over the last few years that when you go to get your haying equipment in May and June or your parts, they might not be there just because of the demand and the issues we've had with, you know, the excuse of COVID previously. So I think if guys that are thinking about it now, they're going to get their equipment now. They're going to get it at the end of the year, which New Holland and Case are very aggressive at the end of the year moving hay equipment just because of the timing. You don't see much move normally, so they're very motivated to make it happen this time of year. Getting ahead of the schedule, getting ahead of everybody else when they call June 15th and there's already 10 swathers in the field and you're number 10, it's pretty hard to get out there. So I think, just Johnny on the spot, and early bird gets the worm there. So
very true. Well, Cheney, thanks for taking a few minutes with us here today and really talking about those opportunities for livestock producers along with farmers and all the opportunities they have with Torgerson's equipment. So thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Well, again, for our friends out there joining us here today, a big thank you to our friends at Torgerson's Equipment for joining us and also bringing you our coverage from the Montana Grain Growers last week and here this week at the Montana Stockgrowers Convention in Billings. Make sure and check out their multiple locations across Montana and Wyoming here today.
Western Ag Network on the road at the Montana Stockgrowers Association Convention. Brought to you by Torgerson's Equipment.